Greetings, everyone. I'd like to interweave a few themes that have been important to us in recent teachings and really throughout our lives as practitioners. We know the importance of the hallmark of Mahayana, the great vehicle, cultivating loving kindness, compassion, love. These terms are used. Basically, taking to our hearts a deep-seated, earnest wish for ourselves and all beings to be free of pain and to have happiness, to be free of the causes of pain, which in the Buddhist view are our own bad actions, unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind, and to have the causes of happiness, namely wholesome activities. So this is familiar to you. And what I want to talk about today is how the cognitive, affective, that means our feeling tone, as well as our cognitive understanding, serve us in developing the ground of loving kindness, which is equanimity, and serve us also in therefore moving toward loving kindness, compassion. And then I also want to say a little bit about how this kind of process, which is the basis for our training throughout Mahayana, is particularly formulated this way in the sutra context. And I want to say a little bit about how it morphs into a tantric and specifically Dzogchen context, since the natural emergence of loving and tender compassion in a Dzogchen manner is the focus of our May retreat. So how these things flow together, how this river of cultivating equanimity and loving kindness in a sutra context flows into the ocean of Dzogchen, which we are all, I think, share a profound interest in. So if we go back to equanimity, the ground, equanimity is a word that can also be translated as balance, as evenness, as sameness. And equanimity is cultivated as the foundation for the cultivation of love and compassion. Particularly, we reflect on the 7 cause and effect precepts that are familiar to many of you. We refer to them as also as the 7 unfoldings. They go back to Chandrakirti in India, very much part of the Tibetan training. And we start with equanimity. We start with aspiring to have a certain kind of balance and evenness in our interactions. And we know as soon as we are called to look into this matter from our own experience, that we are often not equanimous. We are not even. We are reactive. Somebody smiles at us, praises us a little bit. We get so puffed up and happy, proud maybe, self-satisfied for a few moments anyway. And even if we don't go quite that far, we kind of can't help feeling, happy and perhaps nourished. It's fine to feel nourished when you feel seen and appreciated by others. It's when we get kind of addiction to it and feel that everything has to be at that level of positivity toward us, or we're just not happy, then we've lost our equanimity. In the context of our own living our lives, equanimity is really a state of a certain kind of emotional, we might say psychological, it's a freedom. Equanimity fundamentally is the ability to stay open, not get involved in desire, hatred, ignorance, jealousy, pride, etc., with respect to another person. And we all know that we experience a lot of pain through attachment of various kinds, through jealousy, really a terrible feeling, hatred. It's not in our it's not the interest of our moment to moment ease in life to be roiling with this kind of reactivity. I think we know that. So the cultivation of equanimity in the context of cultivating love, compassion, in the context, before we can cultivate love and compassion for the entire universe, which is our aim as practitioners, we have to come to a state of evenness where we are no longer constricted by our habitual preferences and dislikes. If we were to omit the stage of equanimity in our cultivation of love and compassion, we might develop strong love and compassion, and it would likely be like building a house on a hill. It would be tilted. It would run toward the people that we already pretty well like, and we would leave out the neutral people, the enemies. They wouldn't be part of our mandala, mind mandala of compassion. So we cultivate equanimity. Tsongkhapa, the great figure of whose students was regarded as the first Dalai Lama, great figure of Gelugpa, 14th century, very helpfully defines equanimity in a couple of ways. He defines equanimity as being released from coarse reactivity toward people that we experience as friends and enemies. So in other words, the cultivation of equanimity doesn't mean that we've completely divested ourselves of any type, any tinge of, reactivity, but we're not overcome by it. It's a great accomplishment. And it gives us a freedom not to be governed by what the world is throwing at us at any moment, because you can't control. You can't say, well, everybody coming toward me, come with a smile and praise and goodwill. Can't make that happen. But as Shantideva famously says, you can't smooth over the whole earth for your comfortable walking, but put a shoe on and then the whole world is easily navigatable. So we can't control other people's way of dealing with us. We can't control the world. We can't make war and disease stop, but we can even out our reactivity. And in evening out our reactivity, we discover a little bit the pleasure of being in the expanse, you might say, of our own mind state, not being quite so vulnerable to what the world is pinging at us. It's very helpful. It's very sweet. It's calming. Another thing about equanimity is that we become more even. We become able to navigate the waters of our lives somewhat more easily. But we don't become dumb or dull. And that's very important. Also, Tsongkhapa is very helpful here. Sometimes when we hear about equanimity, there's a very understandable concern that, well, doesn't this mean a kind of, deadish kind of neutrality, just kind of same old, same old. Okay, this person is like that. This person is like that. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. That's not equanimity. That's a kind of dullness. That's a kind of indifference. Really important to get the difference in the feeling tone from your own experience of dull-minded, semi-bummed out, maybe neutrality, right? That's different from this kind of free, open state of a greater degree of evenness in our own experience. We can consider the reasons why equanimity is helpful to us. And in this kind of practice, which is very, very common in the sutra traditions throughout the India and Tibetan traditions, we bring to mind, as we just have, well, equanimity would be helpful. I would actually like to have a little more of it. I would. not be quite so reactive. You know, those people who push your buttons, maybe it would be nice not to be quite so push a buttonable. Somebody pushes a button and you know, you're not an elevator. You don't have to come to the call. You see them and you recognize that, as Shantideva also says, by and large, people who are reacting negatively or in ways that we don't like are not really in control themselves. We know it's possible not to be in control. Somebody gets angry at us. They had a bad hair day. They have very little to do with us, actually. But they frown, they glower. We take it personally. We don't like it. So we can reflect. Well, this person's attitude right now is probably less than 80% about me. Yvonne Rand of the Zen Center, the late Yvonne Rand, used to say this. Most of it's not about you, actually. It's what happened when they got up this morning. You can also reflect, well, this person is sometimes vulnerable to different kinds of inadvantageous states. I can understand that. I can also recognize that this person, however they are behaving, they actually are like me. They want to be happy and calm and easy and free of difficulty. And they're not getting it right now. And whether they are kind to me or not, just as much as my friends who are kind to me and who I really enjoy hanging out with, they are the same in this very profound way. There's a profound sameness in all living beings. There are plenty of differences. You know, we speak different languages, we are different colored skin and so on. But at the heart, at the root, every living being wants what it understands to be happiness. All creatures want to be safe, want to be well fed, want to be warm if they're warm wanting creatures, want to be cold if they want the climate around them to suit their disposition. All living beings want that. And so in that sense, from their perspective, as we understand it, they're all equal. It is appropriate for us to be evenly oriented toward developing love, which is a wish for their happiness and the causes of happiness. Compassion, which is a wish for their freedom from pain and freedom from the causes of pain. We want this for ourselves. Again, Shantideva's lines come to mind. He says, when we recognize how we want happiness and don't want pain, and know that that's true for all other living creatures, how could we possibly seek only our own happiness, care only for our own pain? So these are words that we understand. And in meditation, in this kind of meditation, we reflect on this. We use our minds and our intelligence, and we think, well, this person who, looked at me cross-eyed the other day, and I just felt, I really wasn't even thinking about it very much, but I just felt, when I look back, I felt, without even the words in my mind, they're kind of disagreeable. And there's a kind of like, what follows from that is a very subtle sense of, I don't care what happens to them. As Thich Nhat Hanh famously said, we really, in difficult words to hear, we have to ultimately have compassion for the victim and also for the murderer, for the victim and also for the rapist. Not saying this is easily done, but we can reflect on this and develop our recognition at a level of understanding that these people, some of whom we like, some of whom we don't. Why do we like some and not others? Well, because they make us feel good or safe or something positive in a way that others don't. That's how we are. We're reactive based on our sense of me, me-ness, people who don't agree with me or are disagreeable to me, we don't say they're disagreeable to me. We say they're bad. So we reflect on this. We use our intelligence. We use words. We remember what Shantideva said. We remember what Chandrakirti has said. We remember texts or oral teachings that we have heard. This is the stage of reflecting. And then as we think of animals and people and just bring forth examples that are meaningful to ourselves, reflect also how people change. This person who was kind of disagreeable when I first met them, I got to know them. Now they're my best friends. Maybe I even married them. You know, things change. So from our point of view also, equanimity is appropriate. So we reflect on this to the point where something shifts. You just feel a delicate shift. And in that moment, you start to feel the felt sense of equanimity. Whatever it feels like to you. It may be that you're a little more relaxed. It may be that a certain kind of defensive armor that you didn't even know you had around you, but now you can kind of feel, you know, alligator skin or sandpaper. We do have these images often. I'm not aware of them. Somehow it falls away. And you just feel a kind of fresh, oh, yes, of course. Of course. Even people whose values and behavior I absolutely am appalled by, and there are many such people, that I don't not know that these people are doing bad things in the world, murdering people, for example, warmongers, politicians. That's what Tsongkhapa means when he says you don't become dull when you cultivate equanimity. I recognize Putin. I mean, really, how can such a person sleep at night? But apparently he does. But he too wants, you know, he wants his reputation. He wants his old Russia back. I don't sympathize at all with those goals, but as a practitioner, can I even for a moment recognize, yes, but he's just a suffering being who's going to die like everyone else, possibly in great disgrace. He wants to be happy. He wants to. Doesn't mean I want him to succeed in the war. But just from my side, can I be a little less reactive and say, may he somehow, well, that would be the next step. This is the first step of equanimity. So let's say for somehow, some miracle, my heart, my mind cracks open and I get it. I'm no longer filled with reactivity. Doesn't mean I approve. It doesn't mean what he's doing is okay, but it doesn't prevent me from looking at the core of things and being true to the core of my own aspirations as a practitioner, to be able to be even-minded with respect to all living beings so that I can cultivate on the basis of that vast horizon of equanimity, I can cultivate love and compassion and bodhicitta that is universal. So we do this by moving back and forth between reflecting meditation, and then when we get this feeling for a moment, or maybe longer than a moment, or this person who's been pushing my buttons, that kind of screen falls away, and I just see they want happiness, they don't want pain. And I can feel my own sensibility change. And I have, for whatever moment or moments, I have a felt sense. There's a shift. It may be subtle. It's valuable for us to recognize. And then we just rest in that. We stop thinking, bringing examples. We just let that be, and we allow ourselves to feel into it. And then when it falls away, or the next time we practice, we might begin again with reflecting on the reasons for equanimity, It is in accord with the truth that everyone wants to have happiness, doesn't want suffering. In that sense, they're equal. It accords with my own aspirations as a human being and as a practitioner to be a more willing to get past my own projections onto other people, my own prejudices, whatever they may be, and see people, see through to the core of all beings. They suffer. We all do. They're impermanent. We all are. They will die. We will die. We have a lot in common. When it gets down to the bottom line existential facts, we have a lot in common. And also, suffering can be alleviated, and we aspire to that. They are empty of being inevitably always suffering. So we move back and forth between this reflection, based maybe on texts that you've read. Pema Chodron is a wonderful source also. She draws from mind training as well as from Shantideva. We read, we think, we reflect. That's koa, Tibetan, that's understanding. And then we get to some type of experience and we rest. And that's how you might say our nervous system, our emotional dimension, which is what we live in very largely, becomes aligned with our value of cultivating compassion. Equanimity, as you may remember, the cultivation of equanimity ultimately yields the wisdom of sameness. The wisdom of sameness. Reality is the same everywhere. With that, and Longchenpa discusses this in his discussion of the Four Boundless States in a book called Now That I Come to Die. It's translated in the second part of that book. So this is our sutra practice. This is our mind training practice. We come back to it again and again and again. Also, as most, maybe all of us are to some degree, and sometimes very deeply, really oriented toward the Dzogchen. I want to say a few words about how this manifests in Dzogchen context, also as it relates to our retreat that's coming up on May 9th. Everyone does this training. It's part of the training for Dzogchen. In Dzogchen itself, the great completeness, we come at it a bit differently in a very, very profound manner. You are mostly familiar with our refuge prayer of Jigme Lingpa, and we take refuge in the Buddhas, as all Buddhists do, in the Dharma, the community, as all Buddhists do, the three jewels. We take refuge in the exalted awakened ones, the Sugatas, those who have gone to bliss, Guru, Deva, and Dakini, tantric way. And then it gets even more subtle than that. We take refuge ultimately in our own mind nature that we already have and are in the process of discovering. So we take refuge in its essence, nature, and heart movement. We are introduced to the recognition that our true nature is in fact empty in essence. Our true nature is mostly invisible to us. It's empty, we're told. Can't lay your hand on it. It is also a very subtle kind of luminosity, which means that there's just a ground level primordial knowingness that is part of any mind. Mind knows. That's what it does. We may not be able to identify exactly what mind is, but it knows. We call that luminosity. And then also so those two are emptiness, certainly, luminosity for most of our ordinary minds. We aren't aware of our own luminosity. We're so distracted into objects, partly because we're lacking equanimity, and we go into reactivity, and then we can't see the inner luminosity that is actually inside all of our reactivity. That's invisible. But the world likes to, or reality likes to express itself, apparently. And that capacity to take forms that we think are objects separate from ourselves, but from the Dzogchen perspective, are actually expressions of our own mandala of essence, nature, and tender-hearted responsiveness. That becomes visible. So in Dzogchen, we have the very profound teaching that resting in our own mind nature, our own clear sphere, which is what we wish for ourselves and all beings in our bodhicitta prayer, this is the way to utter inviolable, inextinguishable loving kindness and responsiveness to all beings. Seeking this. This is how we find the ultimate sameness of reality, in which all variety manifests like images on a mirror. So our retreat this May is centered on that way of being with compassion. It is a treasure, a tear revealed, as I think you know, by our guiding teacher, Adzon Pela Rinpoche, who met with Avalokiteshvara Chinrezi on Potu Island, which China considers the home of Guanyin Chinrezi, and received Dzogchen teachings from Avalokiteshvara directly. And this is what this is from his collection known as the Lotus Nyingtik, Lotus Heart Essence, Pema Nyingtik. And this is what we are for the first time practicing together in May. So it has a continuity with teachings that we're already familiar with, teachings on compassion. And also it furthers our dimension of Dzogchen, the great completeness, where this universal loving state is not something far away that we reach to, but is something at the very, very core of our being. That word core, a Tibetan word for core, is frequently, these Dzogchen words are throughout the poem. The poem, it's a series of poems that Rinpoche has revealed, and that is our practice this May. We encourage you all, if you're not already in the Cycles program, to consider it. There's a little more information about it on the Cycles page of Dawn Mountain. And if you're not part of Cycles, we invite you to look for the application form. Okay, so with an aspiration that we may develop the full state of universal love, the Dalai Lama speaks of universal responsibility. Basically, to do what we can in this life to magnetize the goodness of all beings, starting with our own. Yeah. May it be so. Thank you. We'll have a few minutes break and then we'll come back and do some practice together. Very nice to see you. Nice to see you, Regina, joining. Charlotte, hi. Hi, Julia. And Jeff. Take a break. Come back.